We're about to embark on our December, which is, let me see, one, two, three, four, our fourth um, 19th Century Speaker Series presentation uh, that is going to be, this is season 4. So in a few months, I'll mention this a little later too, in a few months we'll be putting out a call for abstracts for season 5. So this has proved to be a very popular event, and we're very, very pleased about that. Bob had an idea of doing something when the pandemic hit, and guess what? It just kept going.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll tune in at the end. Bob will introduce tonight's speaker, Gregory Wolf, and uh, just give a few ground rules. Okay, Bob.
All right. Let me just say that it's probably wise to mute yourself once the speaker gets his slides up and starts going, so we don't get any ambient noise come through. And if you want to ask a question or make a comment, please use the chat button in the. It'll either be an icon along the bottom of your black screen, or if it's not there, go to where 3 dots where it says more, and chat will be in that area. Just click on that and you can type in a little box will pop up in the lower right hand corner. Tonight our speaker, as Peter said, is Gregory Wolf. Gregory is the I hope I got this right. Professor of German Studies at North Central College in Naperville,
right,
Illinois. I went to college with somebody from Naperville, and I haven't seen him since graduation, so that's how close we were. But when you think of what Gregory's been doing, the SABR output he has contributed has been substantial. He is currently the co-chair of SABR's Bio project. He has edited 12 or 13 books in the SABR digital library, written over 300 bios and game accounts for the Bio project and the Games project. And it's just been, in addition to, if you watch him on Facebook, while he goes over to Germany every so often to try get some Bitburger and other beers. At least that's what it seems like. The reason he goes over, because he was always having a stein or a glass in his hand. But that's my favorite pose also. But tonight he's going to deliver a talk that's been a long time coming. He was scheduled last spring, and his work popped up in the last minute, and he had to take a trip to Minnesota or somewhere in that area, and we had to substitute, but we got him back on the schedule, and we found a time to fit in. And tonight he will deliver a talk on Bill Hutchison, a forgotten star standing 55.5 feet from home plate. So, Gregory, if you'd like to open your slides, and we'll get started.
Sure will. You all can see that okay?
Very good. You're good now.
Okay,
You're
good.
You're
well, thank you. First, let me just say thanks to everyone for the invitation to speak, and especially to you, Peter and Bob, for your flexibility. Really, over the last year and a half, last year, I had to cancel at the last minute due to a meeting that I had to attend, and I really appreciate the invitation to come back. I didn't expect to be invited again, but thank you so much. And looking at the list of names here, I think I know a good number of you, either from SABR meetings that we've attended, national meetings, or perhaps even at the 19th Century Conference at the Hall of Fame. So I'll go ahead and get started here. Well, 310 game winner, Old Hoss Radburn, he never did it. Todd Galvin won 365 games, but he didn't do it either. Kid Nichols, he led the NL in wins 3 times in a row, won 362 games, but he never did it either. Tim Keefe, what about him? 342 game winner? Nope, he never did it either. Mickey Welch, he looks cool here on my right-hand side. I like this, the patch on his uniform. He won 300 plus games, never did it. John Clarkson, he came close, but no dice. What about Amos Ruzzi? Didn't win 300 games, but a 19th century Hall of Famer. He didn't even come close to doing it. In fact, no one has ever led the National League or the American League for that matter in wins, innings, starts, and complete games in the same season for 3 straight seasons other than Bill Hutchison. So here's probably my favorite image of Hutchison. And I note his career-long or maybe his lifelong albatross, misspelled name. Misspelled name even before he came to Chicago to play in 1889. Throughout his days in Chicago, misspelled. In the 20th century, even on almost every obituary I saw, his name was misspelled. Now, what did he do? Well, from 1890 to 1892, he led the National League in these categories. Each one of these categories, all 5, in all 3 seasons. The only person who have ever led in these 3 seasons, these 3 categories in 3 straight seasons, averaged around 40 wins and about 600 innings per year. Over a 3-year stretch, from 1890 to 1892, the Iron Man right-hander averaged 40 wins, 595 innings, 63 complete games. Each season during a time when the pitching distance to home plate was 55.5 feet. In 1893, that distance was increased to 60 feet and 6 inches to generate more offense. That change also ended Hutchison's statistical dominance. Here's the story of a reluctant and, I dare say, often overlooked hurler who began his professional career at a late age, but whose impact helped bring about substantial rule changes for pitching. William Forrest Hutchison was born in December of 1859 in New Haven, Connecticut. His father, the Reverend William Hutchison, studied at Yale, eventually earned a doctorate there, and was a respected congregational minister, also a missionary, actually in Turkey for a while. And he also served as the principal of the Norwich Free Academy, an independent college preparatory school from 1865 until his death in 1895. I've been in touch with that school. This is from a recent school, one of their quarterly magazines, and there is a PE workout center called the Hutch. There's also a plaque there, but nothing about our topic today, nothing about the baseball player. And I contacted to see if they had anything interesting in their archives there about Bill Hutchison. And unfortunately, they don't, or they don't know if they do. I haven't been to the school to take a look, but it's surprising there's really nothing at all about him. Hutchison was the son of an established New England family. Young Bill graduated from his father's school in 1875 and went to Yale. There he was very active, a member of the Delta Kappa Epsilon fraternity. He was a member of the institution's oldest secret society, the Scroll and Key Club. But for us, maybe most important is he played baseball and really started off as a shortstop. He pitched occasionally, served as the team captain in 1880, his senior season. Now, as John Thorne and probably many of you also in your own research have noted, the pitching distance was increased in 1881 from 45 to 50. That really gave Hutchison the chance to prove that he was a pitcher. He took engineering courses at Sheffield Scientific School at Yale in 1881 and remained on the baseball team and helped it to the American College Association Championship, and he was the primary pitcher. Now, an interesting image here that Keith Olbermann helped me identify. I sent him this image and he kind of cleaned it up. I couldn't find a really good copy of it. Here's Bill Hutchison here in the middle on 1880 team. He looks, at least with the flippy golf looking hat, he looks like one of my students or something. Looks, for me at least, facing the hat, really modern. In 1881, the primary pitcher for the Yale team had difficulty adjusting to the new distance, the 50 feet distance, and that really gave Hutchison the inroad. Two other images that might be interesting for you. This is the 1878 team, and he played with Walter Camp. Here's Walter Camp in the middle. Are you able to see my cursor here on Camp?
Yes, we are.
Walter Camp right here in the middle, really often called the father of American football. He was the created the system of downs and the line of scrimmage, a legendary coach. Here is Hutchison right here, right by him with the bat. I like these images. One other one, this is the 79 team. Here's Hutchison right here with the long, cool-looking sideburns. And this is Walter Camp, another really, really interesting image here. These two baseball players, the kids in the T-shirt and the Y, they could be something from 2023, I dare say, with the way they look. We'll go back. Baseball served as an amateur leisure pursuit for Hutchison as he embarked on a career in business after he left Yale. He relocated to Kansas City in late 1881, and then Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where he was an agent for the Burlington, Cedar Rapids, and Northern Railroad. Standing around 5'9" and weighing 175 pounds, he developed a reputation as a hard thrower for town teams in Cedar Rapids in 1882. And his professional career can be traced to 1883 when he appeared in a few games with Springfield, Illinois in the Northwestern League. The following season, he pitched in a few games for the Kansas City Cowboys in the only season of the Union Association, then considered a major league. Around this time, newspapers described Hutchison as a, quote, phenomenal pitcher or one of local distinction. According to one report, around 1887, Albert Spalding, the president of the Chicago Baseball Club in the National League, had traveled to Cedar Rapids and signed him actually in 1887. But that turned out to be fake news. Hutchison instead signed with Des Moines in the Northwestern League and reported for an exorbitant salary of about $3,500 and joined the club in mid-season around June 1st. In the circuit's final season of existence, Hutchison, now about 27 years old, won 27 games, and the Hawkeyes finished in fourth place in an 8-team league. Hutchison spurned several professional offers from National League clubs, notably Detroit and New York, as well as Chicago again in 1888, because he thought that the reserve rule smacks too much of slavery and still thought of baseball as a somewhat of a gentleman's and a gentleman pursuit, an amateur pursuit. A successful businessman, Hutchison didn't really need baseball, quite honestly. Nonetheless, the attraction of the sport proved too much for him to ignore. In early July 1888, he signed with Des Moines, a charter member of the 10-team Western Association. in uniform for just about half the season. He was the club's primary pitcher and won 23 games and helped the club, the Prohibitionists, to second place. A half came behind the Kansas City Blues and their star, 18-year-old future Hall of Famer, Kid Nichols. This is from the 1888 team. You can see it says Des Moines champions. Des Moines won 3 fewer games than the Blues, yet had a higher winning percentage, 646 to 644. Hence the champions label on this image here. Hutchison is shown here. Looks about like he would with the Cubs. Maybe the other person of note is right to our right. This is 21-year-old Jimmy Bug Holiday, the club's center fielder. He became a star in his own right with the Reds. The next season, he led the American Association with 19 home runs. Then with the Reds throughout the 1890s, led the NL again and led the NL 13 home runs in 1892, and quite honestly was one of the most lauded center fielders in baseball in the 1890s. Despite his objections to the reserve clause, Hutchison signed with Chicago in mid-October 1889, led by 37-year-old Cap Anson, shown here. The club was coming off a second place finish and was expected to challenge for the pennant in 1889. After the 1888 season, Chicago embarked on an unprecedented 6-month World Baseball Tour. I'm sure some of you have written about this, organized by sporting goods magnate Spalding. The club, with a second team consisting of National League All-Stars and other players, they played in various European countries, Egypt, Australia, New Zealand, many different places. Perhaps exhausted from playing for almost 2 years without a substantial break, the team struggled to play 500 ball in 1889, finished in third place, just a few games above 500, 67 and 65, 19 games behind the eventual champion New York Giants. Some other reasons might be given for the team's dismal turnout. Pitching turmoil throughout the season. The club lost their top 3 hurlers. Rookie Gus Kroc, who had led the team with 25 wins and completed all 39 of his starts in 1888. He was injured, missed practically the whole season, traded early on, only won 7 more games in his career. Emerging star Mark Baldwin, he was released during spring training, apparently because he was so wild and drank so much during the tour. Spalding released him in spring training. He went on to Columbus, the American Association, in that season. American Association logged over 500 innings and really established his reputation as a star. And 22-year-old George Van Holtren, who had won 13 and also played center field, was moved full-time to center field in 1889, didn't pitch at all that season. So, but a bright spot on the team was, in fact, Hutchison, the team's most effective hurler. He led the club in almost every category, including complete games, 36 starts, complete games, 33 starts, 36 innings, 318, and won 16, tying 2 other rookies on your left, Addison Gumbert and Frank Dwyer on your right, both rookies, both 21 years old. Dwyer, he later became a workhorse and somewhat of a minor star with the Reds throughout the 1880s, won about 175 games in his career. Gumbert was more of a journeyman throughout the next decade and won about 120 games in his career. Hutchison, that first season, his first full season with Chicago, he had 136 strikeouts, and that was the only one of his statistics that placed him within the top 10 of the league's pitchers. I only mention that because this first season, it's not as if he was a leader in any category at all. This isn't anything new for any of you here, but just something about the pitcher's rubber. At the time, the pitchers tossed from a box measuring 5.5 feet long, as measured from home to second base, and 4 feet wide. As John Thorne and Eric Miklish and many of you have also noted, the rear of the box was 55.5 feet from the center of home plate. The pitchers were required to have 1 foot on the back line when delivering the ball and to hold the ball so that the umpire could see it. They threw from a flat surface. The pitcher's mound wasn't introduced for another decade or so, in the early 20th century. Here's an image of ours along a contemporary card. Don't expect a whiskey and a cigar from Hutchison. Hutchison distinguished himself off the diamond as much as he did on it, whereas the sport was characterized by rough and tumble sorts, hard-living players. Hutchison was noted for his education and his behavior and really his upper-class background. He was among the first college graduates to play baseball, perhaps the first. Though John Clarkson was very often lauded in contemporaneous papers as being the first college graduate, but we know from research now that was all fabricated and did not graduate from college or attend Harvard. Newspapers wrote that Hutchison is as diffident as a modest girl. He's a gentleman, and he don't drink and bum. One of my favorite quotes. That's how he was described in one newspaper. He was a devout Congregationalist. Another newspaper gushed that Hutchison was never known to smoke, chew, drink, or swear, but can outpitch anything that walks. Hutchison was even described, this is one of the weirdest descriptions, Hutchison was even described as the premier danseuse of Chicago pitchers. This was meant as a compliment, apparently. Instead of using the male dansura, they use the feminine here as probably some kind of grammar or semantic error. Given Hutchison's religious convictions, he refused to play on Sundays. Sports writers gave Hutchison several sobriquets. Willie William, Willie Bill, Hutch, they were the most common. He was described as wild in his rookie season of 1889. However, the moniker Wild Bill appeared later in his career and after pitching distances had been changed in 1893. Contemporaneous newspapers, even those in Chicago, often and typically misspelled his name, inserting the extra N for Hutchinson. This tendency, even the Chicago Inter-Ocean newspaper wrote about this tendency. During spring training of 1890, team president Spaulding told reporters, "I think Hutchison will become the star of the league, and I'm not forgetting Clarkson either." That's why I wanted to mention that during his rookie season, he only placed in the top 10 in one category, yet Spaulding has this very profuse and laudatory remark. Sports writers must have had a field day with the sporting goods magnate's audacity to compare Hutchison with the sport's premier hurler, John Clarkson, who had led the NL with 49 wins, third time he led the NL in wins in 5 seasons. It also led the NL with 620 innings, fourth time he led the league in innings in the previous 5 seasons. But Spaulding's pronouncement was prescient. In fact, Hutchison commenced a phenomenal 3-year stretch. Despite the predictions to the contrary, the team, however, Chicago, struggled to play .500 ball for most of the first 4 months of 1890. On August 6th, The Cleveland Spiders pitcher described as a big, slack, twisted lob who throws like a man climbing a stake and a rider fence, beat Hutchison in Chicago 8-1. That lob was, in fact, Cy Young making his big league debut. Here's Cy Young, and this is the interesting box score of that game. Anson's team languished in 5th place, about a game or so above 500, 14 games behind the front-running Brooklyn as the season progressed. Unexpectedly, Chicago went on a roll, led by Hutchison, who had fulfilled Spalding's lofty declaration. 2 days after his loss to Young, Hutchison tossed a one-hitter against that same Cleveland team, yielding only a scratch hit in the 9th inning. Chicago won 18 of their final 23 games. Chicago won 18 of 23 games, all but 4 on the road, and returned to Chicago on September 4 to play their final 27 games in front of partisan fans at West Side Park. Here's one of the few good images of West Side Park. If you know Chicago at all, this is around UIC's campus near Rush. That's kind of the near West Side. That's one of the side streets was Congress. The Homestead commenced with 11 straight victories, 6 by Hutchison in just 10 days. The Chicago Inter-Ocean gushed that the right-hander's fastball came like meteors through the starlit sky in his 5-hit 1-0 victory against the Reds on September 6th. The Colts eventually moved into 2nd place and pulled to within 5 games of Brooklyn with 7 games to play, but the deficit proved too much. On September 29th, 1890, Hutchison tossed what might be his best game as a big leaguer, a one-hit shutout with 10 strikeouts against Boston and Kid Nichols. He also had the winning hit, a 2-run single in the 7th. Here's Hutchison, name misspelled on an old Judge cigarette, about 1890. These N172 were produced between 1887 and 1890. If any of you have one of these cards, you can send it to me. I'll take good care of it. Hutchison led the league with 41 wins, 603 innings, 65 complete games, and finished second to the Giants' 19-year-old phenom Amos Ruzi with 289 strikeouts. As we all know, Ruzi was considered to have the most overpowering here in the game. Pitching was a young man's position, making the accomplishments of the 30-year-old Hutchison even more striking. He was the oldest by 2 years of the 13 20-game winners and of the 12 hurlers who logged at least 300 innings. Hutchison, over the course of his relatively short career, embarked on some barnstorming after the season, but not too much. Quite honestly, he always headed back to his job as in the railroad business during his off seasons. He was primarily known for his primary pitch, the fastball, though he later developed a curveball by some accounts. Sports writers described his heater in poetic terms and by how hard he threw at a time, let's say between 1889 and 1892, when games averaged less than 7 total strikeouts. The Inter-Ocean wrote, "The muscle jut out from Hutchison's forearm like the roots of an old oak tree," speaking about his physical prowess, and continued, "Sometimes he casts a ball athwart the batter that it looks like a streak of pale moonshine in the cellar." No doubt Hutchison would have objected to his pitches to be compared with moonshine. After finishing runner-up to Ruzi in punchouts in both 1890 And in 1899, Hutchison topped the Hoosier Thunderbolt by 9 strikeouts in 1892, fanning a career best 314. Overhand, hard-throwing pitchers were still a relative novelty in baseball. The sport was evolving, pitching specifically. As John Thorne and probably some of you as well have explained, the NL required pitchers to throw underhand through the 1883 season, lifting all restrictions in 1884. In addition, batters were permitted to request high or low pitches until 1887. An excerpt from the Inner Ocean captures the exciting, albeit exaggerated, effect Hutchison's fastball had on spectators and fans. Hutchison brought so much speed down to the grounds with him that part of the ball was still kissing his lily fingers when the other part was eating into the catcher's mitt. He really mined the ball in so swiftly that when the air came together again, it was with a noise like hitting a fat man with a bass viol. In 1891, Chicago and Hutch continued their momentum from the previous campaign. The opening day start to the Pirates against the Pirates in Pittsburgh went to Pat Luby, coming off a fabulous rookie campaign with 18 straight victories ending the season. Hutchison relieved Luby to begin the 8th, scored the tying run in the 9th, and the Colts won the game in the 10th. The next day, Hutchison tossed the 6-hitter to win his first start of the season. Chicago's season, however, was filled with tension and controversy. It proved to be the last time that the team would seriously contend for a pennant until 1906. In and out of the top spot during the first 3 months of the season, the Colts regained sole possession of first place on July 22nd. Once again, Hutchison carried the team and was, quote, always the man expected to help out, noted the Chicago Tribune about the hurler's Ironman strength. The race boiled down to 3 teams. The Colts, as they were typically called in the Tribune and the Inner Ocean at the time, the Colts, the Bean Eaters, and the Giants. On August 6th in Boston, Hutchison battled the Bean Eaters' Kid Nichols for 13 innings. Nichols was en route to winning 30 games for the first of 7 times in 8 seasons, but Hutchison emerged victorious. Here's again another old Judge cigarette of Hutchison here batting. Hutchison wasn't known for batting, batted around 200 if I recall. Chicago's title aspirations endured a serious blow on August 13th when he suffered what the Tribune called a strained tendon in his left leg. Given some extra time between starts, Hutchison forged on, and Chicago won 11 straight games beginning August 15th. On August 31st, the 2 strikeout kings, Hutchison and the Giants' Ruzi, engaged in an 11-inning scoreless tie. Sports writer Leonard Washburn of the Inner Ocean gushed, "There's been nothing like it in the league for years." It set up a tumultuous final month of the season for Chicago. Hutchison's 2-hit, 10-1 victory against John Clarkson and the Bean Eaters on September 3rd extended Chicago's lead to 6 games over Boston. When Hutchison set down the Bean Eaters on 4 hits 11 days later on the 14th in Boston, the Tribune announced euphorically, "Anson and his Colts have captured the pennant beyond question," end quote. The Colts, again as the Tribune called them, increased their lead to 6.5 games the next day, but then the roof caved in. The Bean Eaters won the rubber match, the first of 18 straight victories plus a tie, while the Colts lost 4 straight games. Chicago and Hutchison suffered a crushing blow on September 28th to the sub-500 Spiders and Cy Young. Nonetheless, the Colts maintained a precarious half-game lead with 5 games to play. Charges of cheating exploded the next 2 days when the Beaneaters overwhelmingly beat the Giants in consecutive doubleheaders. The Inter-Ocean ran the headlines, "Looks like a conspiracy," and the Colts were suddenly 1.5 games behind Boston with 3 games to play. Hutchison took the mound against the cellar-dwelling Reds on October 1st in the most important game of the season, maybe the most important game in his life. Despite playing in front of a partisan crowd in the Windy City, Chicago lost 5-1, subdued by Tony Mullane's 2-hitter, thus ending Chicago's pennant quest. Boston won the pennant, but as historians have noted, the club had to wait until November 11th to be officially crowned champion. The 1891 season-ending controversy. Here's Chicago's president, James A. Hart. The Colts president, James Hart, filed a formal complaint with the National League, with the National League office, which investigated the Beaneater sweep of consecutive twin bills against the Giants, an injury-riddled club at the time that played without many of its top players. Hutchison, however, proved once again to be baseball's rubber-armed twirler. He led the National League with 44 wins, 11 more than runners-up Clarkson and Ruzzi. Also in games, 66, 58 starts, 56 complete games and innings, 561. The National League experienced massive changes in 1892. The league expanded from 8 to 12 games, absorbing 4 clubs from the American Association, which disbanded after 10 seasons. The schedule increased from 140 to 154 games, and the season was divided into 2 halves, setting up a postseason championship series. Once again expected to challenge for the NL title, the Colts got off to a disastrous start, losing 9 straight games in April. The Tribune blamed the Colts' 4-week training session at Hot Springs, Arkansas, where the mineral baths supposedly zapped the players' energy. Languishing in 10th place, Chicago unexpectedly won 13 straight, beginning on May 4th, highlighted by Hutchison's 2-hitter against the Giants at Southside Grounds in Chicago on May 7th, as well as a 3-hitter against the Pirates and their 35-year-old future Hall of Famer, Bud Galvin, on May 21st. That success, however, masked the fact that the Colts were an offensively challenged team, scoring a league-low 4.3 runs per game and batting just .235. Chicago finished in 8th place in the first half, and then with 8 games under 500, and then 7th in the second half, 2 games above 500. Hutchison won 3 of his last 4 decisions, including a 5-hit shutout in the season finale against St. Louis in a game that had been relocated from St. Louis to Kansas City, and he finished the season at exactly 500, 36-36. The 32-year-old once again led the league in wins, innings, 622 complete games, starts. He paced the circuit in strikeouts, as I had mentioned, 314, as well as a strikeout walk ratio. I only mention that here because of something that will come up, about 1.65 strikeouts per walk. In 1893, we have, again, more changes to the pitching distance in order to generate more revenue and fan interest after a financially troublesome baseball season. Baseball implemented far-reaching changes to pitching distances aimed to increase offensive production. As John Thorns explained, a 12 by 4-inch pitcher's plate replaced the pitcher's box, and the pitching distance was increased to the now familiar 60 feet and 6 inches. The modifications had dramatic effects on the game. Scoring went from 10.2 to 13.2 runs a game, about 30% increase. Batting average skyrocketed from 245 to 280. The number of 300 hitters went from 8 to 30. As for pitchers, total strikeouts decreased dramatically from around 6,000 to just over half that amount. And walks actually fell by about half of 1%. The new pitching distance, with its increased physical stress on pitchers themselves, signaled the end of Hutchison-like Ironmen. No pitcher in big league history, at least not in the American League or the National League, has hurled 500 innings since Hutchison, let alone 600. While the 400-inning starter became rarer, dropping to 11 in 1892 and 4 in 1893. The new rule changes mark the end of Hutchison's 3-year stretch of leading the league in wins, innings, starts, complete games, and games pitched. The oldest regular starting pitcher in the league, he hurled 3 more seasons, 1893 to 1895, 3 more full seasons, yet did not lead the National League in any category. He was among the most affected pitcher. He was among the pitchers most affected by the increased pitching distance. His strikeouts per 9 innings dropped from 4.4 to 2.2. It was in half, and his walks per 9 inning increased by 50% from around 3 to 4.5. In fact, he might have been the most affected pitcher of anyone at the time. Again, he was also 33 years old. Now, at this age, in his early 30s, he struggled mightily to adjust to these new distances in 93. The Chicago Tribune regularly, over the next 3 years, lambasted what they called his poor pitching. A typical subhead was, Hutch pitched like a farmer. In his final 3 full seasons, he posted a cumulative record of 43 wins and 61 losses, while his ERA doubled from around 2.76 to a little over 5. He was eventually relegated to Chicago's 3rd pitching option behind rising star Clark Griffith and journeyman Adonis Terry. As successful off the diamond as he was on it, at least during his phenomenal 3-year stretch, Hutchison had relocated to Kansas City in the late 1890s, became an executive and contracting agent for the Kansas City Southern Railroad. A lifelong bachelor, he was active in the First Congregational Church. He died at the age of 66 in March of 1926 in Kansas City. Up until his early 1950s, he was still known to occasionally play and pitch in some town ball teams in the mid-1910s. The cause of his death was cardiac weakness, and he's buried in the family's plot, spelled correctly, in Norwich. Everybody, thank you for your attention. Thank you for the invitation to speak tonight. It was my pleasure. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you. I had to find the unmute button myself. Gregory, thank you very much. If you would take your slides down now, we have very good. A comment from Dixie Taranjo about the game between Cy Young and Bill Hutchison early in his career, that while Young won the first battle, Hutch won the next 3, and Cy beat him. Hutch never beat Cy Young again, ending as a 3-10 record against him.
Yeah.
And Hutchison is the only pitcher, one of 2 pitchers that Young beat as many as 10 times. He beat Win Mercer 11 times 11-1-1 against him. So all sorts of things going on.
I
there.
do appreciate Dixie saying that. He and I have corresponded actually about some of these early games. So I do appreciate that, Dixie.
And if you'll, you can look at this later, but Maury Bouchard put a comment in German in there, and you can work your way through that. Now, as Hutchison came up in the late 1880s, is developing into a major league pitcher. We're starting to. We had already started to see pitching rotations start. I believe Chicago was one of the early ones with Corcoran and Clarkson and someone else. That kind of a three-man rotation.
Right.
But they still, there would be one pitcher that would just be head and shoulders above everybody else, and many of those rotations, and they would be pitching these 400 and 500 innings.
Right.
Didn't seem to be an unusual feature.
Right. I did mention that I was trying to hold my talk to about 45 minutes or so, but actually in 1889, in Hutchison's first season, Chicago was the only team that went to what we might call a very traditional four-man pitching rotation. As I mentioned, they had a lot of turmoil on the team, and they had the three rookies with pitching, and their four pitchers all started around 30 games, between 30 and 32, 35 games. In fact, they were the only team to have, a National League team to have that kind of rotation. There were still pitchers that there would be one dominant pitcher, but Chicago was the only one. Cleveland actually was closest to that kind of four-man rotation, but not as even as the four starters were for Chicago.
There's Maury Bouchard also had a comment or question on Hutchison's. How did Hutchison, a New Englander, wind up playing baseball in the Midwest? Was that a function of his work with the railroads?
Right. So he was still with Yale in 1881, and he got a job. He moved. Part of his family moved to the Midwest in the Cedar Rapids area, and he had a job in the railroad business. So his family was well-to-do. Most of his family, from his mother's family, they were professors at Yale. His mother was actually German-born. That was an interest of mine to even start this work. And after he moved to the Midwest, Cedar Rapids, he began playing ball, some town ball team, and then pitched a little bit in a few games, 83, 84, before he went to Des Moines. So it is a little bit of a strange transition from New England all the way to, what we could say is really the far west at that point, really.
Yeah. Before you got to the prairie, anyway.
Yeah.
Now Hutchison was a railroad agent, I think you said, at some of his positions. And if I remember right, that was a rather important position within communities. They were not just guys that sold tickets. They kind of ran the regional railroad at that point.
I think his specialty, at least things that I've been able to gather, he was really in charge of freight. And so that's what made him even more important, because he brought the money into Kansas City and Cedar Rapids.
Yeah, because it's not unusual to see a railroad agent as one of the minority owners of ball teams when they would start up. So they at least accumulated some cash.
Right. And maybe one thing that I did mention, James A. Hart, later the Cubs, in 1880 and in 1891, he was also the president of one of the leagues, I believe, in 1887. So in Hutchison's first full season in organized baseball, he played in a league in which Hutchison, in which James A. Hart was the president. So that was an early contact that Hart had with him, and I believe through Hart to Chicago.
Yeah, Hart was from around Erie, Pennsylvania, is where he grew up. At Girard, I think it was. But he was an executive with many teams. Milwaukee, Louisville. He ended up owning Chicago when Spalding finally sold out and was a kind of a league power broker for a while.
Yeah.
Dixie, you got something?
Yeah, Greg, I'm just looking at your baseball card photographs, both individual ones and team ones, and then looking at the pictures of Cy Young, Nichols, and Russi. Hutch seems to be the smallest of the four in physique. Could you comment on that?
Well, I don't know how much I can comment on it, other than, I mentioned his height, I believe, around 5'9", 175 pounds. If I compare, if I was just doing a little bit of a quick comparison of his size. I mean, his height was a little bit above average at the time, but he wasn't as big as some of these pitchers at the time. No doubt about that. And whether that affected his ability to pitch once the distance was changed in 1893, perhaps that could have contributed to it. Although I would probably argue that, given his age, it was more difficult to make the transition. But no, I couldn't say a whole lot about his height and weight. Contemporary newspaper accounts of his appearance always described him as big or muscular and things like that. But he was tall and thin. If you see pictures, you're right. If you look at pictures of Cy Young being quite corpulent, that's not how any image of Hutchison appears.
I was at one of those box scores you showed. Hutchison, who you say wasn't much of a hitter, was batting 8th because the catcher was batting 9th.
Yeah.
Well, if there's any other questions or comments to direct to Greg from the audience.
Well, other than, like I mentioned, probably back, always at the SABR meetings and back with you all in Cooperstown last year, being involved with the SABR bio project, and many of you also contribute. I see Len here, and of course, Len has been a mentor of mine for the last 15 years or so. I really want to thank Len for everything that he's done for me. But I encourage all of you to consider submitting bios to the bio project. I'm happy to talk to anybody about bios, about what our requirements are. If you don't know what they are or how they might have changed over the last 10 years and what we're doing, I'd be happy to talk to anyone. There are so many 19th century players that need bios. All of you know Bill Lamb. He writes a lot of 19th century players, but we do not have, quite honestly, many authors anymore writing about 19th century players. And Bill Lamb finds the most incredibly obscure players who played in one game or pitched one inning in 1882 and writes an essay about them. We need a lot of 19th century players and early 20th century players. If anyone at all is interested, please come and please shoot me an email. Be happy to talk to you about it.
Very good. Yeah, the bio project is it's researchers. If you don't use that, you're missing out on something, because there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bios of players, and they have the most interesting facts throughout their career, their pre and post season careers and whatnot. And it's a fascinating thing just to read through.
Yeah. Well, I hope everyone does know about the bio project. Our bios are about 4,000 words. They are strenuously edited. They're all fact checked. They go through multiple editions. They're copy edited. This is for the overwhelming majority of the roughly 6,000 bios that we have. It is the longest and arguably most important piece of biographical essay about these players. Sometimes the only biographical essay about the players.
I find that to be very true. And just sometimes just having their name show up in somebody else's essay will give you a hint of what's going on. Well, let me thank you again, Gregory, for the talk. It was really a lot of fun to hear, and it was a long time coming, but we are very grateful for you for presenting on Bill Hutchison, one of those obscure stars that we have in the 19th century. For all of the audience, before we close, let me wish Happy Hanukkah, Merry Christmas, and a Happy New Year to everyone in this season. We will be back in January, and we'll let Peter give us a close.
Gregory, thank you very much again. It was wonderful for presentation. As soon as I saw those slides, I knew it was going to be wonderful. I wanted to say that, you know, Hutchison really was under my radar, and I know really that much about him. You know, I knew about some of the other pitchers of that era, you know, that stand out to me, you know, as a little bit more New York centric, and Mickey Wells and Tim Keefe and that crew, Amos Lucy. Interesting about the conclusion of the 1891 season, where the Giants are really accused of hippodroming, particularly Mutry, and who was managing the Giants. And just as you say, as Hart came in to the meeting to make that accusation, he must have made a pretty good argument, because that's when Mutry was dismissed. He was dismissed in November of 1891 from the Giants. So there's a little parallel there that comes out. I want to, again, thank you again. Great job with the bio project. I know I owe you a couple. Anyway, as Bob was just mentioned, yes, we go into the spring semester in January, and we begin with on January, I believe, the 9th. We're going to have Tom Gilbert, and he'll be representing with a little bit more time on his hands now. He'll be representing something he did at the Fred for us, and at our invitation, he decided to send an abstract for the presentation he's doing on basically criminals that played in the amateur era of baseball. And that'll be January the 9th. And we'll be heading somewhere around March time frame. Bob and I and John will be sending out a notice, a call for abstracts for our 19th Century Speakers Series Season 5, which will commence in September. So we're looking forward to this January through May, and we're looking forward to seeing some abstracts. And again, thank you all. Have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. Enjoy the spirit of the season. I know there's a lot of tough things going on in the world, but as Tim Schneider of Yale University says, you got to keep up with the things you do, as the civic things you do, and this is, I guess, part of it. Okay. Be well.
Stay safe, everybody.
Thank you.
Good night. Thanks for coming.